So we're going to start off by adding pencil shading to our toilet paper roll. So to do that, you want to kind of, again, if you remember in the last video, hold your pencil so that it's pointing towards the line. Keep your hand back here, kind of on the opposite side of the line. And then you want to shade, starting off pretty light, all the way up this line. And then as you come in towards the middle of the toilet paper, if you think about a toilet paper roll, it's round. So the inside of it is going to be light, and then the outsides are going to have a little bit of shadow on to show that it's three-dimensional. So when you shade in towards the middle of the toilet paper, don't come in too far, but you're going to press down a little bit darker on the outside, and then as you come in, you're lifting up the pressure of your hand until it kind of fades into white. So you can kind of do that in two parts. You just want to make sure it's like the same all the way down to the bottom. So maybe practice that on a different piece of paper, like if you have a different piece of paper near you, or you can practice it next to it. Just kind of try to practice like shading dark and then moving downwards and picking up the pencil so that you're creating a value kind of scale. And that's what you want to do on the side of your toilet paper. So you're going from kind of like a medium dark on the outside to a light on the inside. You really don't need to come in too far because, like I said, it is going to be a white roll of toilet paper unless you have colored toilet paper. So you don't want to have to shade too much. And then I'm going to shift my paper so that I'm like facing away from the line again. And you're going to shade dark on the outside, and then try and do the same amount of pencil shading as you come in towards the middle. Again, try and make it so that you can't really see your pencil lines. Might take a little bit of practice. But that's what you want to do on the outside. And then I'm going to imagine that the light is coming in from the top. So we're going to keep this top side of the toilet paper pretty light. And then underneath here, if you think about this being the side of the toilet paper, I want you guys to just kind of like mimic the curve of that with your pencil and just kind of add a little bit of a shade underneath it, because there probably would be a little bit of a shadow underneath it if the light's coming up from the top. Maybe not that much of a shadow, but just a little bit of one. The inside of the top of the toilet paper, you probably want to shade it a little bit darker, so use an oval motion when you're shading that. And then the side where the piece is coming off, you want to give that a little bit of a shadow too, so a little bit darker than what you have right here, but again shading along the line, keeping your pencil facing away from it, and then as you move in towards the actual piece, you want to make that lighter. And again, you can go over top of your shading to kind of smooth it out. I know mine doesn't look perfect right now. But also keep in mind that toilet paper has crinkles in it, so it doesn't have to be completely perfect. In fact, if you want to add some little kind of like crinkles here and there to your toilet paper, that could make it look kind of realistic. And there you have it. I know sometimes there are like lines on the top of the toilet paper, so if you kind of go in a similar motion to that top oval, you can kind of add some lines in there to make it look like there are some lines on the top of your toilet paper. Alrighty, and there you have it. So that's our pencil shading. Anything that has any kind of shading on it, you can do it with pencil. So like if we look at this apple, like you can see that my light source is coming from up here Okay, I don't know where my hand is. My light source is coming from up here. So you see the highlight right here, and then the shadow is going to be underneath the apple, and then the shadow is also going to be on the top of the apple because the light is hitting directly here. So anything kind of like away from the light, you would see a shadow. So just always try and think about a light source when you guys are shading. All right, so now we're going to move on to shading our, let's do our pyramid. So again, if our light source is coming from the top, you would see a shadow probably more along the bottom, and then maybe just pick a side that you want the light to be hitting on. So I'm going to say my light source is coming from right here, and if it helps you to draw an arrow, go ahead. So if my light source is coming from here, say the sun is hitting right here, I would see a shadow along this line on the left hand side of this line because that is kind of in front of it. And then this whole side would just in general be darker, and then there'd probably be a little bit of a shadow underneath too. So let's do this one with scribbling, and I'll just kind of show you guys how you can add scribbling with a different type of pen. So I'm going to use like a skinnier marker for this one, if I can find it. Sorry about that, guys. So I'm going to use a skinny marker for this one. And I'm just going to start by adding the darker areas. So if you remember, I was saying to shade along this line a little bit. So with the scribbles, you can do whatever kind of scribbles that make sense to you. If you want to hold a ruler up against that line so you don't go any further than it, that might help you. Or a piece of paper or anything straight. You can kind of add like darker scribbles along this line. And then, like I said, this whole side of the pyramid is actually going to be darker. So it's going to be darkest along the line, but then as you get into the middle, you're still going to add scribbles, but they might just be a little bit lighter. The more you add, the more they'll kind of blend together. And then down the bottom of the pyramid, you also might want to hold up a ruler so that you don't go past it. Down the bottom of the pyramid, since it's furthest away from the light source, that's also going to be darker. So think same kind of darkness to this line. And then to finish it off, maybe hold a ruler up on this side and just kind of like add scribbles to kind of even the whole thing out. So the goal is to try and blend your lines together, but again, like along this side, they're going to be darker, and then down on the bottom, they're going to be darker. And then on this side of the pyramid, we are going to see a little bit of a shadow because that whole thing can't just be like bright white. So I'm going to put a little bit of scribble down at the bottom here. And then I might see like a really kind of light scribble kind of coming up, just so it doesn't, you know, look so different from the other side. But my pen is not really hitting the paper too hard. I'm kind of controlling it so that I'm like not adding as many lines and I'm not pushing as hard. I think scribbling is fun to do with a pen like this, just because you can kind of control how much ink comes out a little bit easier. So this is just like a regular, I don't know, Z-grip pen. But again, like, think about where that light source is coming from, and then anything that's kind of further away from the light source, so down at the bottom here, is going to be a little bit darker. Alright, so that's scribbling on a pyramid. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to do hatching on this cube. So again, if the light source is coming from this direction, this side of the cube is going to be pretty light, and then these are going to be about the same amount of darkness. And I want you guys to try and emphasize like the edges of the cube being darker. So like on this side and on this side. So we're gonna do just regular hatching for this. This time I'm gonna use a thin Sharpie, so if you have different pens lying around, just try it with different pens so that you can kind of get an idea of how to do this. With something like a cube or like a rectangle, when you're shading it, if you want to use a ruler, it might help you out. So again, kind of like putting the ruler up against the area that you're trying to outline, and then you can also kind of use the ruler to hatch, or you can just use your freehand. But I'm going to make this side of this cube a little darker because the light's coming from this side. So again, if you want to use a ruler for this, you can. So what I'm doing is I'm just adding those hatching lines. They're darker next to the corner of the cube and lighter as you move away. So this pen is not working too well, but it's still kind of coming out okay, so I'm going to go with it. Might have to switch pens in a second. But again, you're adding less lines as you move away from that dark area. Sometimes it's fun when pens start running out because they kind of look like pencils. So try not to be perfect with these. If you want to, you can go the other direction too, and that's called cross hatching, but for now I'm just going to do regular hatching, which is one direction. Alrighty, so I'm going to do the same thing underneath here, holding my ruler up and outlining it to start with. And then I'm going to go in a horizontal direction. If you want to like make kind of like sketchy hatching, you can kind of go back and forth. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just try to add less lines as you come away and more lines next to the corner of the square because you're going to see more of a shadow right here. Okay, so we are going to see a little bit of a shadow right here on this corner, so maybe outline it to start with. And then whatever line you're kind of outlining, you want to go in that direction. So now our hatching has kind of become cross hatching because we're going in the opposite direction. But with this, it's going to be kind of hard to see where the shadow is. So maybe you would see a little bit of shadow on this side, but I would stick to just one side of that corner that has the most shading. If you want to go all the way across with cross hatching, you can, and that's just going in the other direction. Maybe there's a little bit of a shadow over here, and then maybe there's a little bit of a shadow on this side too. Okay, I don't know if you necessarily need to add shading to this part of the cube. You can if you want, like you can add like a little bit, again just going in one direction, maybe just to show that there is a little bit of a shadow on the front of the cube. And I'm kind of at an advantage because my pen is running out, so if you do have a running out pen, don't always just throw them out because they can be really useful for these things. But you can add, you know, maybe a little bit of cross hatching here, so going in the other direction. Again, I'm leaving like a white space right here because that's where the light's hitting, but it would make sense to see a little bit of a shadow on this side because this is kind of like getting nearer where the shadow is. Alrighty, so that's hatching. And then the last one I'm going to show you is going to be with the stippling. So we are going to use just a regular marker. You can use a Crayola marker, you can use a regular Sharpie, but I'm going to show you how to shade this circle with stippling. So what you need to do is you first need to kind of figure out where the light's coming from again. So we're just going to keep going with this kind of top right angle. And then I would suggest drawing some kind of a smaller circle, kind of making it like a crescent shape on that top right section of the circle. So if you have a smaller circle that you want to use, like a smaller template circle, maybe you have like a roll of tape or something that you can draw around, grab another template that you can draw around. Or to draw a circle that's similar to an oval, you're just going to kind of like go around and around and around until you have a circle shape that you like. So I'm just going to draw it right next to where that light source is coming from. So we're kind of making like a crescent moon shape right here. And then you might want to draw like maybe one more circle, like kind of like between here and here. So starting like here. Again, with your pencil. Trying to make it a circle shape, but you don't have to be perfect with this because we're going to erase that afterwards. And then what I want you guys to do is to try and collect your stippling. So add more dots around this kind of circle shape. I'll erase it a little bit so you guys can see it better. So this circle shape right here, you're going to leave that pretty much blank. This kind of medium or middle crescent, you're going to have a medium amount of dots. And then this one, you're going to add more dots. And you're going to try and fade them to get lighter into this circle. And that's how you would shade with a pencil too. You would add like a darker pencil around this and then fade in to get lighter. But I'm going to show you guys with stippling. If you want to practice doing this with a pencil or a different technique, you can, but that's kind of how I like to set it up so you have something to work with. So I'm going to add more dots all the way around the inside of this kind of bigger crescent shape. So all the way up to this point, I'm adding a lot of dots next to each other. Take your time with it and make sure you're not creating like lines, and make sure they're actually dots. If you have a thin piece of paper and you have a Sharpie like this, maybe put a different piece of paper underneath it, like a scratch piece of paper, because Sharpie does tend to bleed through onto tables. So just try and save your table and not let that happen by putting a piece of paper underneath it. Remember, you want to keep your hand on the paper when you're stippling, or on the table, so that you're not like, your hand is controlled and you're not jamming the paper and put the pen into the paper. And you're going all the way up to the top of that crescent shape. So you can see I've kind of made a crescent with that. As we come in, we're now going to add less dots. So you're going to kind of scatter them and have more space in between them, but you still want to keep your dots sporadic, and you want this to fade up into it. So you don't want it to go like a bunch of dots and then a medium amount of dots. You do want to try and fade it, so kind of like add dots along the line so that it's not such a obvious difference, if that makes sense. So you're adding less dots now, medium amount of dots. But again, make sure they're fading into the outer crescent. And then as you get into this tiny crescent, or this tiny circle, you just kind of want to add a few dots kind of coming in, and then kind of keep like a blank space, like a circle. Then you can kind of like add more dots around the outside if you want to like really make that edge obvious, or you could trace around the whole circle. But I would try not to trace around the circle and just see if you can really make it look like it's 3D just by adding dots. And then when you squinted it, you should be able to see a sphere instead of a circle. And you can use that method by drawing the circles with any of these techniques I just showed you. With hatching, you would just kind of hatch around it. With pencil, you would just shade around it, but shade kind of in this motion. With scribbling, it would be the same thing. And then you just kind of erase those circles that you drew to start with. You can actually erase the whole thing, like the whole outline, if you wanted to. And there you have it. Those are 4 different ways to shade, 4 different shapes. If you guys want to try different techniques with different shapes, or if you want to try your own shapes, go for it. But I would suggest trying to use different pens if you have them, and just kind of practicing with this, because it does take a little bit of time. Alright, I hope you guys learned something, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much.